Notre Dame's going all in on Marcus Freeman and the football program in a way that I honestly wasn't sure was possible in this modern era of college football. Plus, Luke Smith and I both believe that Notre Dame is going to make it to the national championship. But are they going to win it? That's all coming up on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and it's great to have you here with me on Tuesday, December 17th, and thanks for making this your first listen of the day. Quick reminder to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you might be tuning in today. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we got Luke Smith on the show today, as we do every Tuesday during the season, and we have a lot of stuff to cover. We fill out our entire college football playoff bracket through the national championship, and we both have Notre Dame in the final, but are they going to win it? You'll have to wait and see to find out. We also talk about a new transfer commitment, the first transfer to commit to Notre Dame in this cycle, former Alabama defensive back DeVonta Smith, not the wide receiver, the defensive back. He is going to play for the Irish in his last year of eligibility, but also the big news of the weekend. Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame have agreed to a long-term contract extension. We have been hearing about it for weeks. Well, now it is official, and they announced it right before the college football playoffs. So a lot of great things going Notre Dame's way right now. And for more, let's bring in Luke. All right, so Luke and I were texting yesterday throughout the day, and we had heard that there might be some good news coming down the pipe for Notre Dame, and we were speculating about what it could be. Then at 4:18 p.m. Pacific, 7:18 p.m. Eastern, I said to Luke, could it be Marcus Freeman's extension? And literally 3 minutes later, NBC's Maria Taylor broke the news that Marcus Freeman had in fact agreed to a long-term contract extension that is believed to be a 4-year deal that locks him up for 6 more years and makes him one of the highest paid coaches in the country. So I guess I can say I called it, even though it was basically at the buzzer. But what was your reaction when we found out?
I'm a little surprised it was announced when it was. I'm not surprised it got done, and I think it definitely should have gotten done, but I expected them to maybe hold on to this announcement and have the timing of it come sometime around the semifinals. Definitely not 5 days out from the first round of the playoffs. Now, does it matter? Don't think so. I think Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated said this today. I wouldn't be surprised if half the team doesn't even know that this happened. I don't think it's really going to impact the players' level of focus and preparation around the team. For me, it's just more so of a bad juju thing, just doing something like this, making an announcement like this before a big game. Historically, things like that don't go well. But, historically too, when Notre Dame messes around with their uniforms, things don't go well. And they've worn more uniform combinations this year than they've probably ever had ever. So, and it's been okay. So maybe that's all silly to even worry about.
That's actually a good point. I didn't think about that. They've probably worn more combinations this year than they have in a really long time, and haven't loved all of them. I think you and I can agree on that. But when it comes to the timing, you are talking specifically about the announcement, not necessarily about when it got done. Am I interpreting that correctly? Okay.
Yeah, I expected it would get done as soon as they made the playoffs, but I expected them maybe to hold on to the announcement of it, after Notre Dame wins the playoff game, and then the fan base gets even more invigorated going into a potential Sugar Bowl matchup against Georgia. Now, does it matter? Probably not, but that was just my perspective on it.
Okay, that's much different than what I had seen from some other people who I think in their mind, Marcus Freeman has been at the negotiating table for much of the past week, and he's like, hold on, we're going to have to push back that special teams meeting this afternoon because I got to talk more with Pete Bavacqua. That's not really what you're talking about. You're just talking about the announcement. Okay, I get that. I'm glad it got done now, and I put this out on Twitter. I think it's important that Notre Dame got this done before some other jobs open up, and I'm not even saying that this eliminates him from, say, the Ohio State job entirely, and if, for whatever reason, Ryan Day is let go or decides to move on. I'm going to be nervous until Marcus Freeman publicly states that he is not going to take that job, but that is just me. I just think it's good to have this established so that if any other suitor wants to poach Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame, they are going to have to pay quite a bit to do it. And Pete Bavacqua is actually going to talk to the media sometime this afternoon, so we're probably going to get some more information about the buyout, some of the specifics and things like that. But this is a really big moment for Notre Dame because you think about the history that they have had with first-time head coaches. It has not been great. So the fact that Marcus Freeman has reached this point, one that we both believe he's earned, now he has that second contract, I think that's a big win for him and the program.
It definitely is. And it is pretty wild that this is already, the conclusion of year 3. It doesn't feel like that long ago where there was that crazy week that it resulted in Notre Dame hiring Marcus Freeman as head coach the first week of December back in 2021. But I think it's significant, right? And they're now committed to him through 2030, and they're investing more than ever before in him and in his program. And what I'm curious in seeing is there now an uptick in recruiting following this? And you might ask, why am I wondering that? Well, given what I assume is in this contract, like I'm sure there are some assurances around investment in recruiting and things of that nature. Like, this was not a great class this year that they brought in, 2025, by any account. And I think Marcus Freeman, in an honest moment, would probably tell you that. So is there any uptick? Is there any more concerted effort now that this has been controlled, basically? Because a lot of Freeman's efforts, I'm sure, were towards having a successful season and making the playoff, knowing that an extension was coming if he did just that.
Yeah, you couple that with the success that this team has had this season, I think it really does go a long way with recruiting high school players and the transfer portal, because we're going to get into a transfer that Notre Dame added on Monday. But to me, this is just another indication that the university is going all in on the football program in the modern era. And that is something that we were not sure of a couple years ago, let alone a few years ago. You think about the fallout after the whole Andy Ludwig debacle, and everyone was like, does the university care? Are they willing to spend all of this stuff? But then in the time since, they signed Mike Denbrock and Al Golden to 4-year contracts as coordinators. They're both some of the highest paid coordinators in all of college football. They also restructured Chad Bone's contract as well to keep him on as the GM. They invested in a brand new football facility. Now they're investing a ton of money in Marcus Freeman, and they have 2 NIL collectives. Like, it is rare for this football program and the university to be aligned like this, but I think it's great, and it's going to lead to a lot of success in the near future.
Definitely. And that Andy Ludwig thing is funny to look back on, especially when didn't he resign midseason?
He just resigned midseason.
Yeah, a year and a half later. Wow. Just goes to show you how often we are prisoners of the moment, and not excluding myself necessarily from that, although I didn't really think that was that big of a deal. It was just kind of a tough optics, but it's a new administration now. That was not Pete Bavacqua that was overseeing that whole thing either, and it'll be interesting to see how this evolves with him in charge.
It's also funny to look back on that coaching carousel in 2021 because there were so many big moves, and oddly enough, the ones that had a little bit more uncertainty to them, like Dan Lanning going to Oregon, and like Marcus Freeman going to Notre Dame or becoming the head coach at Notre Dame, because neither one of those guys had head coaching experience, those are the ones that have actually worked out the best. Meanwhile, you've got Brian Kelly going to LSU. That has not worked out nearly as well. Lincoln Riley to USC has been an absolute dumpster fire. There were so many moves in that cycle. I'm probably forgetting some. Brent Venables going to Oklahoma, although that's not the first-time head coach. So that's an example of it not working out. But what else am I missing? Because that was just such a crazy time in our lives. And the fact that these are the 2 that have worked out the most is pretty surprising.
Yeah, I think I was looking at this recently, actually, because there's one other name in that was not bad. So
Kalen DeBoer, Washington.
Kalen DeBoer.
Billy Napier.
Billy Napier. The jury's still kind of out, I guess, on what's going on there. I think he's okay. Maybe he hasn't had the most success, but maybe he has finally turned it around in year 3. What else do we got? Well, you had Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. That has been an abject failure, if you ask me. You had Mel Tucker get extended that year, so that was didn't go so well. And I think also, who else is? Oh, Fickle. That has not gone well. Well, that was the next year, was that not? That was next year.
Yeah, that was actually the following year.
Okay.
But you could kind of lump those 2 in because it felt like Notre Dame might go after Fickle. But yeah, that was a crazy cycle, and it seems like Notre Dame, even though it was a risky move, so far it has worked out, and it looks like they're betting everything they have on Marcus Freeman. And, if he leads them to a long run here in the college football playoff, he's certainly worth every penny. But another move that indicates a change in the college football power structure. What if I had told you a couple years ago that a starting defensive back for Alabama is going to transfer away from Tuscaloosa and spend his last year of eligibility in South Bend playing for the Irish, because Pete Nakos from On 3 had it first, made the announcement that DeVonta Smith, not that DeVonta Smith, but another DeVonta Smith from Alabama, is going to be transferring to Notre Dame. It is their first public commitment in this transfer portal cycle. What do you think of this move?
It is pretty wild on its face getting a starter from Alabama, but I guess if you watch that Alabama defense this year, can you really blame him for wanting to go somewhere that is going to play better defense and probably have a little bit more better structure? Because that Alabama defense was not super impressive most of this season. But it's a great pickup for Notre Dame. It seems like they're just going to do this every year, find an old guy in the portal to play nickel. And he was a priority recruit for Notre Dame back in 2021. He was recruited by both Mike Mickens to come to Notre Dame as well as Marcus Freeman to come to Cincinnati. He's a Cincinnati kid, and it's good to see them land him this time around. Really strong season this year at a 74.4 NFL passer rating allowed, which was 12th among Power 5 slot corners. So it's a great pickup for Notre Dame, and it is funny just to see how the tides are turning, pun intended.
Yeah, I don't know if this one move means that now Notre Dame is above Alabama at the top of college football, but I certainly am going to play like it is, because this was a good addition. You mentioned the connections to the staff. He went to LaSalle High School in Cincinnati. There's been just a lot of connections with the Cincinnati area and Notre Dame, especially since Mike Mickens took over as the defensive back coach. And I'm kind of at the point now where whenever they add someone in the portal or a high school recruit at defensive back and Mike Mickens is the guy leading the charge, then I'm going to trust that evaluation and just assume that he is going to be a home run addition for the Irish, because he was a really good, really productive cornerback. He really played the nickel. I think they call it the Husky, and the Alabama defense had 30 tackles, TFL, 5 passes deflected, and a forced fumble. Also was good in coverage, only allowed 19 receptions on 29 targets with 0 touchdowns allowed for the year. So this is a great addition. You think about what Notre Dame has done in the past 2 years, first getting Thomas Harper, then getting Jordan Clark. Both of those guys were hits, and they didn't have nearly the pedigree that Smith does. So I feel like this is a big-time addition and a great way to start off this transfer portal cycle for Notre Dame.
It is, and I'm trying to find this tweet because it was really funny. Essentially, it was, oh yeah, here it is. It's an Alabama, sidelines Bama saying, I absolutely hate that Alabama just lost DeVonta Smith to the portal. That one absolutely sucks. Basically, somebody replies saying, I'm losing interest in college ball since it went pro. And this guy goes, I used to criticize people for having this take because I thought college football would always at its roots still feel like college football. Now I think that feeling is completely irrational. I have no way to dispute it. Just what are the odds of it's Notre Dame coming after a guy from Bama? And that's why this guy no longer has faith in the sport.
It's a wild time, and Alabama has been basically on the other end of this for so long. The fact that now they're on the wrong end of some transfer portal stuff. And don't get me wrong, Notre Dame is going to lose some guys in the transfer portal as well, probably at least one guy who nobody wants to go, but this is just kind of the way it is in college football. So I would just say the only thing that surprised me about this is that it was announced the week leading up to that IU game, because it really felt like Notre Dame was trying to keep all of this under wraps. But look, unfortunately, sometimes word gets out, and that was the case in this one.
Yeah, and I thought about that, right? Because I think you were right. I think they were probably intentionally trying to keep some of these quiet. But when you think about it, this is the position where they were probably best equipped to have an announcement because, right now they only have, 4 scholarship corners. Your options coming back next year at nickel are going to be 2 true freshmen in Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary. So those guys aren't going to leave. Leonard Moore and Christian Gray are firmly entrenched as starters. I think Carson Hobbs probably thinks he's going to start a lot. It's not like defensive tackle or, dare I say it, quarterback, where you could potentially ruffle some feathers with an announcement. And let's also face it, these guys have agents. They want to get their stuff out there if they can. And sometimes that's what happens.
In light of this, I have seen some stuff where people are like, oh, well, what if Benjamin Morrison wants to come back?
He's not never coming back. Come on.
I know. I don't know why that was ever even considered. I mean, he loves Notre Dame. He loves the university, but he also loves being a first-round draft pick. And if he's not a first-round NFL draft pick, he's going to be very early second round. So any notion that Benjamin Morrison is coming back to Notre Dame, it's not going to happen. Before Luke Smith and I give our pick for every game in the college football playoff, I want to tell you about TNT College Football. It's that time of year, folks. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it is guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever. Bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love, TNT Sports' coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup between the SMU Mustangs and the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Now let's shift gears here to the college football playoff. And one nice thing about the new 12-team format is that you can kind of fill out a bracket. It's not quite the same feeling as filling out the NCAA tournament bracket for basketball, but hey, there's 12 teams. There's a bunch of different games to talk about. So, Luke, let's get into it. We'll start off with the top left side of the bracket, 8-9 game. We'll go through the first round, then the second round, and then by that point, we're going to have different picks in the semifinals and national championship. So we'll go through the first round relatively quickly. Let's start off the 8-9 game, Ohio State hosting Tennessee. Who do you got?
I think Tennessee wins in an ugly one because this Ohio State team and Ryan Day are broken. I don't think Ryan Day has slept since the Michigan loss. I don't think this team really likes each other either. I know, like, you hear rumors about potential infighting inside the locker room. Like, the reality of the situation is they have played well below their potential all season long. They're probably the most talented roster in college football, and the Michigan loss was inexcusable. Just a terrible, terrible loss. Really could have lost to Nebraska, too. And the Penn State win, they went on the road, won that game against Penn State. Not super impressed with Penn State. So I think Tennessee gets this done. I think Ohio State, once again, in a big game, gets out-toughed by that physical Tennessee defensive line. And part of the reason I think that is because it's going to get ugly early, and that crowd is going to turn in a hurry.
Yeah, what a weird feeling for Ohio State being in the college football playoff, and there's not a single person in that fan base who's happy with anything that's going on in the football program. They also signed another top 5 class, and no one even cares. I am taking Ohio State in this game partially because I think they absolutely have to win, and when you play with this real amount of desperation like the Buckeyes are going to be dealing with, I think that they're going to be able to win this game. I also think the weather is going to play a factor in this game. I know that Nico Iamaleava has been kind of hitting his stride as of late, but the conditions in Columbus are going to be just as bad, maybe even worse than what we're going to have in South Bend on Friday. And I think for that reason, Ohio State, that defense is going to shut them down, and they're going to win a tight one. So we're on a slightly different page in that first game. I think that's going to be a theme here for these games. But let's move on to that 5-12 matchup, Texas hosting Clemson.
I like Clemson. I think Texas.
That's crazy.
I think Texas finding a way to lose the Georgia game, because that's what they did, was significant. I think they invested a lot in that and still came up short. Their offense hasn't looked quite right all year, and I think Clemson has the horses offensively to put up points. Klubnik wins in the Klubnik-Ewers rivalry. Once again, he's kind of dominated that one, and I think Quinn hits the portal after this game. Also, it would be very Dabo Swinney to win a game in a playoff that nobody wanted him to make, and so that is why I am picking Clemson and Cade Klubnik's return to Austin.
You make some really good arguments, but I cannot forget what I saw from Clemson going up against that Georgia defense at the beginning of the year. And this is the closest defense they faced to that. I mean, they didn't do much at all against South Carolina. I would not put South Carolina's defense, even though they have a great defensive line, they aren't quite at the same level as a Texas or a Georgia. And I just think that that defense is going to shut them down. So I like Texas, but I do agree that Clemson is going to make this a game. I would probably take Clemson to cover, but I do not expect them to win outright. All right, next game, Notre Dame, Indiana. I've already given my pick. I like Notre Dame 28-17. So give me your final score prediction in this one.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame dominates this one. I think it's probably 35-14, to be honest. I don't think this is really a game. I think Notre Dame takes Indiana out of it early. They probably score some BS last touchdown when it's 35-7, and all these fans can enjoy the game from brothers that aren't going to get into the stadium. And they've been so obnoxious on social media this week, and I don't really know why, because they have nothing to go off of.
So you think Notre Dame's offense is just going to go right through this Indiana defense?
Yeah, I really don't think that I do think they have some talented players along the defensive line, but man, I just think this Notre Dame offense is humming at the right time. And I think this offensive line is going to get a little bit healthier, specifically Billy Shrout with the time off. And I just think they kind of bulldoze them. And this is not a very competitive football game.
I hope you're right, because that would make Friday night a lot more relaxing, but I think it's going to be close. I think Notre Dame is going to be able to pull away in the second half, but I do expect some tense moments there in the second half. All right, 6-11 game, Penn State hosting SMU. Who you got?
So I'm going to go with SMU here. And as you'll notice,
you love the dogs in these.
So, yeah, outside of Notre Dame, Indiana, I have picked all underdogs. And this is the one I probably feel the least confident about. But this is more of like a karmic thing. Like, I don't think Penn State deserves to be the 6th seed. They haven't done anything of note all year. They just keep getting breaks, basically keeping the Big Ten title game close, but not winning it. Like, they just keep getting rewarded for mediocrity. And I think this time it finally bites them. And I think SMU's offense is very good. Don't think Penn State's defense is very good based on what we saw against Oregon. And I think that SMU wins this one. And the fans in Happy Valley are just going to be furious with James Franklin once again. The noon whiteout, unfortunately, isn't quite the same as the night whiteout. And I know they wanted a night game. You're not relevant enough to get one.
I love how you're just like, this is like old school Luke Smith, just finding all the opposing fans and just calling them out. Yeah, unfortunately am taking the opposite side here. I am taking Penn State in a close game. So you're taking 3 out of 4 underdogs. I'm basically going with chalk, which I admittedly kind of hate, but maybe it's just the old format and the way things have worked in the college football playoff for so many years. Most of the time we saw chalk. So I guess that's why I'm leaning this way. I mean, you got a bunch of spreads that are at least a touchdown. I actually think SMU could win this game if we're on a neutral field, but I think that their offense is so predicated on throwing the ball downfield. They've got great athletes in space, but the weather conditions in State College are going to be pretty miserable, and I think that's an advantage for Penn State because they have 2 great running backs. And I still think they have a good defense, even though Oregon shredded them. I've got some takes on Oregon, but I like Penn State to win a close one here. But that leads us to the second round. And so the first matchup you've got is Oregon versus Tennessee. I've got Oregon, Ohio State. Who do you think will advance?
So Oregon has probably been the most consistent team all season long, right? They didn't get tripped up once. I know the Wisconsin game was kind of close. Outside of that, really not tested a whole lot besides Ohio State. I think Oregon wins this one and moves on to the semifinals.
Okay, so I like Oregon as well. And something that's been on my mind lately, when we talk about Notre Dame and their path and how anybody could beat anyone, that's been something that's, been regurgitated, not just on Notre Dame podcasts, but all of college football. Like, there doesn't seem like there's a truly elite team. Now, Oregon won the Big Ten. They are the only undefeated team left. So are we underrating Oregon? Because no one thought Clemson was what they turned out to be in 2018. And I'm not suggesting that Oregon is going to be as good as that team, but I think that there might actually be a little bit more significant of a gap between them and everyone else than maybe we're giving them credit for.
I don't know that I feel that strongly about them. Again, I don't think their defense is that great. Like, I think they're okay. Their offense has been very impressive. Dylan Gabriel's played really intelligently all year, but I don't think that, they're not on the level of that Clemson team. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. Obviously, outside of the Texas A&M game that Kelly Bryant played at Kyle Field, I mean, geez, there was a Syracuse game in there. That was a 4-point game. Clemson beat the brakes off everybody that year. Like, that was not really I don't think it's comparable. I don't think the NFL talent's comparable either. And I think that for that reason, the gap is probably not as significant as what we've seen in past years when you've had a super team like a Clemson or an Alabama or a Georgia.
I remember as we tried to rationalize how Notre Dame would not only cover that 10.5-point spread against Clemson in 2018, that they would win outright. And you and I thought the spread was crazy. Well, as it turned out, it was actually not enough. But I remember thinking, like, well, they've got a true freshman quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. No true freshman has ever won the national championship. And yeah, their defense is great, but like Notre Dame's defense had been good. And all of that was wrong. So I wonder if like our impressions of Oregon end up being true, but I've got Oregon beating Ohio State. It's really hard to beat a good team twice, but I'm kind of with you on Ohio State. I just think that they're broken and they're going to get by Tennessee. It's not going to be pretty. And then I think they just won't be able to get it done against Oregon because when it's late, I think that pressure will get to him. And I just think that this Oregon team is really good. So we both have Oregon advancing into the second round, but now we've got Arizona State playing. You've got Clemson. I've got Texas. Does the Dabo run continue?
Yeah, man, I've got Clemson going to the semifinals. I don't think it's particularly close either. Whoever plays Arizona State in this football game, I'm sorry. The Big 12 title game, great win against a pretty mid Iowa State team. Obviously, Cam Scatterbo has been fun to watch, but this Arizona State team doesn't quite have the level of athletes that everybody else in this playoff does. Besides maybe Boise, I think they're probably comparable, right? But everybody else is kind of on a different field, and maybe Arizona State keeps it closer a little bit they're the Fiesta Bowl, right? I think it might be the Peach, actually. But regardless, I don't think that they're
you're right.
It
is
well.
the Peach. Yep.
Yeah.
Fiesta is Boise State.
I think there'll probably be way more Clemson fans at the Peach Bowl than Arizona State fans do.
So as I look at my matchup between Arizona State and Texas, I have seen a lot of people picking Arizona State to beat the Longhorns. This has become like a trendy pick amongst college football pundits. I just don't see it. Yeah. I like Scatterbo a lot. He's fun to watch, and he's impossible to bring down. I'm sure he'll get some big runs off, but he hasn't seen anything like that Texas D-line. So I think Texas wins going away. But like I said, I have been shocked to see how many people like Arizona State to make it to the semifinal.
Yeah, it is shocking. I don't really know what that's based off of. Just playing crap teams in the Big 12, I guess.
They have been really hot lately, but it's I don't know. It's just different going up against this caliber of opponent.
Definitely. And I think they'll learn that.
Before Luke and I give our picks for the most important games in the college football playoff, I got to tell you about a great new promotion courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. All right, for my $5 bet, we're going to look ahead to Thursday Night Football later this week, and we've got the Chargers hosting the Broncos. The Chargers are favored by 3. They just got absolutely smoked by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But you know what? I'm going to take the Chargers again. I think the Chargers win, and they cover the 3-point spread. And for more, just visit FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Personally, I love Prize Picks because I'm able to play it out here in California, so it is definitely my favorite. And you can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Next up, Georgia versus Notre Dame.
So I think Notre Dame does win this game. I think it comes on like a last-minute drive. It's kind of probably similar to what they did against A&M, just icing the game away with a late touchdown. Riley Leonard making a couple big throws, some runs from Love and Leonard and Price maybe too. And I think that this is when Notre Dame can really put their stamp and say that this has been a successful season. And, this is Notre Dame that they haven't seen in a long time. Winning a game against Georgia, even if Carson Beck doesn't play, which it doesn't sound like he's going to by all accounts, right? I think that that's huge. Beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day, you're the, standalone game at night. It's probably going to be like 12:30 as this game's ending. Like that's a big time spot. And I think Notre Dame comes through. It's going to be a tough game, but I think they're going to win that one late.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a if not now, when sort of thing with Notre Dame, because Georgia does feel gettable for the first time in years, and part of that is due to injury, right? Losing their starting quarterback. Even though Gunnar Stockton was really high-profile recruit, I just think that matters when you have an inexperienced guy playing his first real start on a big stage. Is going to be in the college football playoff if it's going up against Notre Dame too. So like, there's just so much at stake there. But one thing I would say is like, it doesn't matter who they got at quarterback. They have dudes everywhere on defense,
Sure.
and that is going to be a very, very, very difficult challenge for the Notre Dame offense. I think that this game would look very similar to the game that we just watched between Texas and Georgia in the SEC championship. Two great defenses going at it, two offenses that are admittedly flawed. So it's going to be a low-scoring game, but I'm with you. I like Notre Dame to win. It's going to be like a brutal game as a fan. Hopefully we get this. Hopefully we are lucky enough to experience this, but I like Notre Dame on some crazy, might be the last drive. Maybe they come up with the stop late, but I do like the Irish to squeak by in that game. And if they do win that, they would take on the winner of Boise State versus SMU in your prediction, or Boise State versus Penn State in mine. So who would the Irish theoretically take on if they were to be the Georgia Bulldogs?
Well, I don't think either of us is picking Boise State here. I think that it's a sham that they have a bye. It's just absolutely ridiculous that we have Boise State as the 3 seed in this college football playoff. But they're not winning a football game, and they're not winning a playoff game. And I think SMU wins this in my scenario.
Yeah, I like Penn State to win this one. Didn't even really think much about it. I mean, Ashton Jeanty has had a remarkable year. He's a fantastic player, but one thing Penn State has been good at is stopping the run and just playing good defense. They have dudes all over that defensive line. Boise State, they held strong against Oregon at the beginning of the year, but that was then. This is now. So I like Notre Dame to play Penn State in the semifinals. All right, so you've got Oregon, Clemson, SMU, Notre Dame. How do you see those two games shaking out?
I like Oregon making the national championship game. I think that's where the Clemson magic runs out, unfortunately for Dabo Swinney. Or even if it's Texas, I think Oregon probably wins that football game. And then I do think Notre Dame wins the semifinal. Assuming they get past Georgia, I think that is probably the biggest test prior to the national championship game. And whether it's SMU, like it would be in this case, or Penn State, I like Notre Dame to win that football game.
So I've got Oregon, Texas, Notre Dame, Penn State. I think Oregon, Texas would be an absolutely awesome game. I think that there'd be a little bit more points scored in that one. I really thought about taking Texas, but like I said earlier, I'm really high on this Oregon team. I really like Dan Lanning. I think Dylan Gabriel is like the perfect quarterback for this team and this scheme. And I just think that they have a little bit more offensive firepower than Texas, and they ultimately get the win. And I've got them taking on Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame and Penn State is going to be an awesome game, but this is basically a hypothetical matchup that we have been talking about for weeks, ever since Penn State was ranked one spot ahead of Notre Dame. For weeks, we're like, why are they ranked ahead of them? Well, now we're going to get to see these two teams play each other, hopefully, in my side of the bracket, but I like Notre Dame. So we took very different routes to get to this point, but we both have Oregon versus Notre Dame in the national championship. Who you got?
You know, at risk of sounding like a blatant homer, I think I am going to pick Notre Dame to win this game and win the national championship. Now, whatever, a variety of outcomes could happen. And this isn't binding. This is just this is kind of how I feel right now. I do think they're going to win this whole thing. And that would be awesome if they do. If they don't, whatever. But I think Notre Dame rises to the moment. It'd be a very challenging game, but I think they beat Oregon and win the national title. So there we go.
Unfortunately, this is where I think the run ends for Notre Dame. I just can't pick Notre Dame to then beat Oregon, because it's like I'm basically predicting them to do three things that they haven't done in decades. Not necessarily beating Indiana. They're capable of beating Indiana, but they haven't won a major bowl game since the early 90s. So that by itself, they haven't done in a while. Then they'd have to beat Georgia, which is something they've not beaten a team like Georgia in decades. So then to do that and then beat Penn State, I am really high on this team and what they can accomplish, but I think that ultimately with playing 4 more games, their depth is going to be tested in a way even more so than it has been all season long. I think those injuries are finally going to come back. If Notre Dame was fully healthy, if they had Morrison, if they had Traore, if they had Botello, I think that they would be able to win this game. But ultimately, I think that they're probably going to suffer more injuries if they do get to this point, just because it's football. They're going to be playing against the best competition imaginable. So I think Notre Dame comes up a little bit short with the loss to Oregon, which would, absolutely crush me in the moment. But if Notre Dame makes it to the national championship and we get to experience Oregon Notre Dame, I think that this would be a very, very successful season for everyone involved.
Well, this is a really good exercise because I think it's kind of a throwback to just how this dynamic typically goes. You're using, rational facts typically to determine outcomes of games, ends up pretty chalky, which naturally then blends itself to pessimism, not picking Notre Dame to win the national championship. Meanwhile, I'm just kind of going off vibes, telling every other team like they suck, and then of course picking Notre Dame to win it all. So that we ended up in the same place with different results, but kind of classic way to get there for both of us.
That's true. It's very on brand for all involved here. And I love that it immediately just started off with Notre Dame's going to roll Indiana. It's not even going to be a game. And meanwhile, I'm like, this is going to be a tough game. I'm going to be super nervous in the fourth quarter because that's just how it goes. That's just kind of how we operate here. But even though we took very different routes, we both think Oregon's going to play Notre Dame in the national championship. And obviously some people are going to call us homers, but there's a lot of other people that think Notre Dame is actually capable of doing something like this in a way that, frankly, I have never seen before.
Right. Even when they have made the game or made the playoffs in the past, you haven't really seen this level of picking Notre Dame to be in a spot like that. So it's definitely a change.
It's kind of a weird feeling. I don't know if I like it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm just trying to ignore all that. And I'm focused on Indiana Friday night and just crushing their spirits immediately because they don't deserve to be happy for another moment. So there you go.
You've been online way too much this past week.
I have.
I can already
tell. Seen way too much of their nonsense.
Exactly. I can already tell you've been exposed to way too many members of Hoosier Nation online. But this is actually not going to be the last time that Luke and I are together on a podcast this week. The plan is to get something out Saturday morning, right? You still free for that? You committed over text. Now I got to put you on the spot on there to make sure that you're still in.
No, that's a great idea. And I look forward to talking about said, 21-point win or whatever it was that I predicted. But should be fun.
Yeah, so be on the lookout for that Saturday morning post-game reaction. Luke and I live from his condo in South Bend. We're going to figure out the logistics, how it's all going to look, because we've never done one in person together. We might have to go in separate rooms. We will figure that out. But until then, Luke, it's been a pleasure. And hopefully our picks are right. Your pick specifically.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Go Irish.
All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. Going to have a brand new episode coming your way every single morning throughout the rest of this week, including Friday, the day of the game. And then, as Luke and I just talked about, a little post-game reaction show coming your way on Saturday morning / early afternoon. The best way to stay up to date with everything we're doing here on the show is to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you're tuning in today. If you like the video, please remember, give this video a thumbs up, or if you're listening to the podcast, rate the show 5 stars and leave a review. I am having so much fun talking about this team, talking about this season and the playoff run with you. So I hope you join the show the rest of the week. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. I hope to see you tomorrow.